Welcome to Project Lakota Sichos this week. We're learning Parshas Va'era Sicher Beis in Chelek Yud Aleph on page 24. This is a Sicha on a Rashi. The Rabbi will discuss the Makkah of Orev in Rashi's view, in two Pirushim of Rashi here. This is after a break of a couple of weeks now learning a Sicha on Rashi. This is a gewaldige Sicha, very geschmacke Sicha, how the Rabbi goes through here, the Rashi, and explains every detail, how it fits into the context of what Rashi is saying. V'kesher l'makis orev shehevia kadosh baruch hu al Mitzrayim. Mesupe b'parshaseinu. So the Torah relates regarding the Makkah of Orev as follows. Shakadosh baruch hu tziva l'Moshe lo'im ala parei. Hashem commands Moshe to tell Parei, Ki im encha mishaleach esami, if you do not send my nation, hineni mashliach b'chava goyme es ha'orev. I will send, or as Rashi will explain, the word mashliach means I will incite against you Orev, which is a mixture of animals. Umalu batim Mitzrayim es ha'orev v'gama adama ashehem oleh, and it will fill the homes of the Mitzrayim and also the land that is on it, that the homes are on it. As the Rebbe will explain further in the Sikha, the exact meaning of this pasuk. Now, Rashi b'pirushai maitik min hakosav v'satevis mashliach b'cha. Umefarish, and Rashi explains what's the meaning of these words. Megare b'cha. He will incite, the Eibishter will incite against you. V'chein, the proof that the word mashliach means to incite. V'shein behemois ashalach bam. The teeth of animals will be incited against you. Loshen shisui. The word mashliach means to incite. And that Rashi brings the French word, incite balaz. So, b'pashtus kavanasai, the simple pshat of Rashi here is, levayer shetevis mashliach einay meloshen shiluach. It does not mean to send. K'may im encha mishaleach baschalas kosav ze atzmai, like the word mishaleach in the beginning of this very pasuk. Ela shehi meloshen girui. Rather, it means to incite. Al derech al tizgarubam v'chayetze b'zeh. You find in Torah a few times it says al tizgarubam, don't incite them. So over here as well, mashliach means that the Eibishter will incite the wild beasts to come and attack the Mitzrayim. There are a few diyukim that force Rashi to translate the word mashliach as incite. Aleph, number one. If the word mashliach would mean to send, then it would say mishaleach, not mashliach. So it's clear that it does not mean to send. Beis, V'loshen shliches masim yesa leimar mashliach es ha'orev bach. It would be more fitting to say, I will send the orev to you. Zeise meres hanishlach. First you say who you are sending. Ula'achri ze lemiu nishlach. And then you say to whom you're sending. U'kamayla kaman. For example, what we have later in this week's parsha, Sheleach es kol magifoisai el lipcha. I will send all of my plagues to your heart. So the pasuk says the Eibishter is sending, and it first says what he sends, the plagues, and then to whom he sends it. Mashenken mumaloshin girui. But if mashliach does not mean to send, but it means to incite, haritevas bach muchuberes lemashliach. So then these two words are connected. Ki b'cha hu chelik ma'apula atzma. This is part of the action itself that he's inciting against you. It's not only sending to you that you send someone to do something to you, but it's part of the pula itself. When I incite against you a wild beast, or for example, for anything similar. So the word megara boy goes together. I am inciting against you these animals. So therefore, if the pasuk here says that mashliach as bach es ha'orev, so it makes more sense to say that the word mashliach means to incite, not to send. Gimel imam muvanu shliches. If the word mashliach would mean to send, masam loymar, it would be more fitting to say mashliach lecha. I'm sending to you. Oy mashliach elecha, which also means to you. V'loy mashliach bach, that I'm sending in you or against you. Aval imuvane giroi. If the word mashliach means to incite, masma bitoy mashliach bach. So then the word makes sense to say that Hashem is inciting in you. Hashem, in other words, Hashem is inciting against you. So the term bach is the right word to be used. Because of the last two reasons just mentioned, Maitik Rashi min hakosov gam tevas boch. Rashi brings the word boch as well. Afshu mefarish rak tevas mashliach shepirusha megara. Even though Rashi is only coming to explain the translation of the word mashliach, that it means to incite. Within the pshat of Rashi itself, who kaisav oidapa megara boch. Rashi brings the word boch again. This is part of what forces us to say that the word mashliach does not mean to send, but it means megara, as the Rebbe brought over here. So everything is clear. We understand why Rashi comes to the conclusion that mashliach means to incite and not simply to send the animals upon the Mitzrayim. So the Rebbe now says, however, we have the following questions on the way Rashi presents this pshat. Aleph, Lama mevi Rashi lepirushai, Raya lepirushai, ma'akosov shebeparshas Azino. Why is Rashi bringing as a proof to his pshat from a pasuk that's in Parshas Azino? V'lei mimashakosov kaidim lezeh beparshas bechukaisai v'hishlachti b'chem eschayis asada. There's a pasuk that says earlier than that in Parshas bechukaisai v'hishlachti, which means I will incite against you eschayis asada, the animals, the wild beasts of the field. That's an earlier pasuk. The question is even stronger. There's another reason why there's an advantage of bringing the proof of this pasuk and not the pasuk in Parshas Azinu where it says V'shem b'emes hashalach bam. The Makkah of Orev, what are we speaking about? The Eibishter will incite the wild beasts. It's also speaking about inciting wild beasts. There it's talking about inciting animals that will bite with their teeth. That's a different thing. That's unusual. That's not the same as the case that we're talking about over here by Orev. Another question in what Rashi here says is after Rashi explains that mashliach means megara, to incite. Why does Rashi add, in addition, that it's a lashon of shisui, which basically means the same thing, that mashliach means to incite? Now we can't say shebelashon shisui kavanase levayir or lefarish megara. Shisui is simply coming to translate and explain what the word megara means. Megara means to incite. In case you don't know the translation of the word megara, so Rashi adds and says megara means shisui, to incite. So that can't be what Rashi is saying, for three reasons. Ki, Aleph, number one, Tevas shisui eina yedua muvenas l'talmud yosem tevas megara. It's not a word that's more known than the word megara. If megara needs a further explanation by adding the word shisui, shisui doesn't explain it more than megara. Megara is a term used in Torah more than once. The word shisui is not found in Chumash at all. So if Rashi would start with Lashon Shisui and then would add Megara, maybe we could say that Megara is clarifying Shisui, but not the other way around. If the word shisui that Rashi adds is simply coming to clarify the meaning of the word megara, which on its own is not understood, so it should be written as one continuation. Megarabach, which is a lashon of shisui. Why does Rashi divide them? First Megarabach, then brings a raya from a pasuk to that, and then adds a further clarification, lashon shisui, as if it's an additional point. Gimel, another point there is, if in fact shisui is the explanation of what the word megara means, so it's not necessary to write megara and then to explain what megara means by adding the word shisui, Rashi should have just said that the meaning of mashliach means mishasa, that he will incite against you. It's not necessary to use the word megara at all if it's not a word that's understood. So it's certainly not just coming to translate the word megara. Shisui is adding something more here. So now we can't answer that when Rashi writes the word shisui, what Rashi is explaining is the translation of the word mashliach on its own would mean to incite, megara. However, in our case, it doesn't simply mean megara, but it means something additional. It means shisui, which is a different kind of incitement. It's an additional level of incitement. That can't be what Rashi is saying either. The lefize adayin koshe beizanal. The second question we asked before still remains outstanding. Why wouldn't Rashi write it as one flow? Megare loshen shisui. Megare would mean inciting, and then clarify that over here it's not just plain incitement, but it's a greater level of incitement, which is shisui. So that question still remains. Why does Rashi interrupt by bringing the raya from V'shem Be'emes HaShalach Bam? Now, if this would be the pshare, that shisui is actually something more than simply megare, hagufa minale. The question now becomes, how does Rashi know this? That here the word mashliach doesn't simply mean to incite like we find in other places, but it also means an additional level of shisui, which is a stronger incitement, as will be explained later in the Sikha. But how do we know this? How does Rashi know this? Noisaf al megara, that it's something more than simply megara. So these are the questions here on this Rashi. The raya that Rashi brings, the order of how Rashi says it, what's the additional meaning of this shisui? Besides megara, there's something more in shisui, an additional incitement in the Makkah of Orev. What is this all about, and where does Rashi know this from? Lahalan mamshich Rashi b'pirushei amaitikes hatevis Orev. Then Rashi brings from the pasuk the word esa, two words esa Orev, umefarish, and Rashi explains as follows. Kol mine chayes rois. This was a mixture of all kinds of wild beasts. Nuchoshim va'akravim, snakes and scorpions, barbuvia, in a mixture. V'hoyu mashchisim behem, and they brought destruction upon the Mitzrayim. V'yesh tam bedava ba'agode b'chol mako make lo mezu v'lo mezu. There's a reason explained in Medrash for each make, why this one and why the other one. B'tachsise mulchames malachim ba'aleim. The Eibishter came and punished the Mitzrayim with the tactics that kings use in their wars. Kiseder malchus, the way a king lays a siege on a city. Kishetzara al ir, when you lay siege on a city, mitchila mekalka meinesel. The first thing is you destroy the water springs, so they shouldn't have a source of water. V'achakach toiken alein mariin b'shoifres, and then you blow with horns, with shofres. You create an alarm, a noise, liyaram ulavalam, to frighten them and to confuse them. And this is what the Makkah of Tzvardeya is about. They croak and they make noise. As explained there in Medrash Rabbi Tanchuma, what the Makkahs are all about. This is the Rashi. So there's many questions here on this Rashi. So here the first question is as follows. Aleph, Divrei Rashi Elu Mekayram Hu B'Medrash. Rashi is quoting from the Medrash. Ella, shebepirish Rashi ubishini loshen. Rashi quotes it differently than it is in the Medrash. The Medrash yeshnam beis deis lahaminim shebemakis orev. Again, the Medrash yeshnam benigeya lahaminim shebemakis orev beis deis. There are two opinions in the Medrash what the mixture of orev consisted of. Aleph, the first opinion is shoyedovim arayis v'namarim, bears, lions, and leopards. Beis, another opinion, shoyutzrayin v'yetushin. It wasn't wild beasts. It was tzraim v'yetushin, all kinds of wild insects, flying insects. Tzraim, some translate as wasps, and yetushin, mosquitoes, or any kinds of wild and dangerous insects that was biting them and hurting them. The fact that Rashi doesn't spell out, like the first opinion in the Medrash, that it's bears, lions, and leopards, so that's understood. Rashi says chayes rois, wild beasts, which includes all kinds of wild beasts. In the pshat of the pasuk, there's nothing that forces us to say that the arbuvia, the arav, consists specifically of these three animals. Certainly, Rashi cannot explain, according to the pshat of the pasuk, that arav consists of wasps and mosquitoes and other flying insects. As the Medrash itself proves this, and it says as follows. Let's look back at what happened by Tzvardeya. By Tzvardeya it says, Vayamusu at Tzvardim. And the Tzvardeya all died. And it didn't disappear from Mitzrayim. Because there wasn't a hide that could be used in a beneficial way. So therefore it all died and caused a tremendous smell, and it was terrible for the Mitzrayim. These wild beasts, if they would just die and stay there, so the Mitzrayim would have a benefit of using their hides. When the Makkah was over, it was all removed, it all disappeared. Now, so the Medrash says, She'ilu hayu tzran v'yetushin hayalan sheyasrichu. According to the second opinion in the Medrash, that these are actually wasps and mosquitoes, and that's what remained after the Makkah, so why didn't it stay there after the Makkah? And it should all died where it is, and there is no hides for the Mitzrayim to have benefit from. So the same thing that happened by Tzvardeya should have happened over here. The fact that the Pasuk says that after the Makkah it all disappeared, the reason is because it was wild beasts that have the hide. And therefore, the Eibusher took it away, so Mitzrayim can't have any benefit from that. So in the Pashat Pshat of the Pasuk, the Medrash proves that that can't be the Pshat. And this is true according to Rashi as well. Rashi brings this reason in his Pshat as well. That the Orev did not die the way the Tzvardim did. And he brings the reason that the Medrash says so they shouldn't have any benefit from the hide. So this negates the opinion that it consisted of wasps and mosquitoes and the like. The fact that Rashi adds that there were wild beasts and there were snakes and scorpions. Why is Rashi spelling out snakes and scorpions? Either way, it's not understood. If when Rashi says all kind of wild beasts, so that includes already snakes and scorpions, why does it have to be specified? Rashi doesn't specify who all the wild beasts consist of, so why is he specifying the nechashim and akravim? And if snakes and scorpions are not included in the wild beasts that are mentioned, and therefore Rashi has to separately tell you that they were part of the Orev, so from where does Rashi know that in fact Nechashim and Akravim were part of Orev? If they're not included in the category of Chayis Rois, so maybe they were not there by Orev, if Orev consists of Chayis Rois. So what is this specific Nechashim v'Akravim that Rashi specifies separately? Beis, another question on Rashi is Madua mefarish dafke bepasik zeh sheyesh tam bedava b'chol mako lomazu v'lomazu. Why suddenly here does Rashi explain that there's a reason for each makkah why Hashem brings it? If in the pshat of the pasuk an explanation is demanded to explain why each makkah was brought, it should be explained by the first three makkahs, immediately by the first makkah. Why these makkahs and why in this order? Why does Rashi wait here to utter the fourth makkah to explain that in the Medrash there's a reason for the makkahs and in the order that they're being brought? So Yesh Mefarshim, this is a question that many Mefarshim speak about. The Rebbe brings one answer here inside the Sikhe, and the Ha'aretz the Rebbe brings various other explanations why Rashi brings it exactly here, and the Rebbe explains why you can't accept their pshat. So there are Mefarshim that say, this is a pshat in the Sifsei Chachamim, in the first three makkahs, there's no need for any explanation. It's self-understood from what it says before there in the pasuk itself. The point of those makkahs was to punish, to hit their gods. Rashi explains by dam, they would serve the Nile River as a god. So the first makkah is to hit their god, and then afterwards the plagues on the Mitzrayim themselves. That's the reason why it's first. Here, their god itself was affected. And Makkah Svardeya also affects the Nilus, the water. The Tzvardeya comes out of the Nilus. And Rashi says, because the Nilus, when Moshe was placed into the Nilus, it protected him. So therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu could not hit the water to bring the Makkah because he was protected by the water. The Makkah of Tzvardeya is also related to the Nilus, to the Yair. It's not the Nilus itself that becomes plagued and affected by it. So therefore it comes after the Makkah of Dam, where the actual Nilus itself is affected and turned into blood. So that's the first two makkos. So we can understand very clearly from what Rashi said before what the point of the first two makkos are. When it comes to the makkah of kinim, it's also understood what the objective of the makkah is. It's clear from what it says there. It's over there where the Chartumim in Mitzrayim, they agreed and said, oh, this is a finger of God. This is something that they could not create. The kinim is too small for the Chartumim to create. But now Rashi comes to the makkah of Orov. So here the question is, Lama makkah zu dafke. What's the point of this makkah? Over here we don't see any specific reason and objective of what this makkah is about. So Rashi says, look in the Medrash, you'll see that over there it's explained that the makkahs are compared to the tactics taken in a war. That's why dafke here Rashi has to explain this. Ulam pirish ze eina moving klal. But this pshat of the Mefarshim is not understood at all if you pay attention to what Rashi actually says. Aleph, the first problem is, Im kavanasa shel Rashi, ba'avos ha-medrash, levaya be'ikeres taima shel makis orev. If, in fact, Rashi is only bringing the medrash here because he wants to explain the reason for this makkah of orev, so im kein eich yitochn shesatam lemakis orev ene maybe. The continuation of the medrash, where it explains the reason for this makkah of orev, Rashi doesn't even quote. Rashi says, go look it up in the Tanchuma. Rashi only brings the reasons of the previous makkahs that are not relevant for the makkah of Orev. But his main point is not to explain the previous makkahs. Those are understood. And Rashi quotes the hezbollah of those makkahs, and the hezbollah of the makkah of Orev, Rashi doesn't quote it all. And the other hand, the question is, that according to Rashi, the purpose of the first three makkahs is known and simple. So Rashi doesn't bother explaining what the point of those makkahs are. So why here, when it comes to Orev, there's Rashi retract of what he himself wrote before by Dam, and he brings in new reasons, what it says in the Medrash. Gimel, another problem here is, Lefi Pirish Anal. According to the Pshat that the Mefarshim here say, Hemshech hadibur hazeh b'pirish Rashi, the continuation, where Rashi brings this medrash to explain the reason for the makkah of Orev, hu ach v'rag bir taima shel makkahs Orev levad. It's explaining what the reason of makkahs Orev is. V'hainu shehu inyan b'fnei atzmai, this is a separate point. V'ein loy shayches v'hemshech l'mashakasav l'fnei zeh b'iseh hadibur. It's not connected at all to what Rashi said in the beginning, what makkahs Orev is. Kol minei chayis ra is the fact that it's a mixture of animals. It's two different points. First, Rashi explains what Orev is, and then Rashi goes on to explain what's the reason for the makkah. Whenever Rashi comes to explain two different points in one or few words of a pasuk, Rashi will bring this word twice, and explain each point separately. You have this in this week's parasha as well. Rashi brings the word atir from the pasuk twice, and he explains two separate points. Rashi should have brought the word es ha'orev oidapam a second time to separate that. First he's going to explain what is orev, and then to explain what's bechlal, the whole objective and the reason for this makkah. It's two separate points. But that's not what Rashi does. Rashi, in the same Rashi as a continuation, explains first what Orev is, and then the reason for the makkah. Why does it all come in the same Rashi? So this is all part of the second question that the Rebbe is asking here. Why is Rashi suddenly now, by the fourth makkah, bringing the reason for the makkahs? Gimel, another question, going back to the Rashi itself, another problem with what Rashi here says is, when he brings the Medrash, Batam lamakis dam mevi Rashi, rakes hamoshel, mebli lahazbim, muvani benimshel. When Rashi brings from the Medrash what dam is about, so he only brings the analogy that it's like a war, when you lay siege on a city, and you cut off the source of water. So Rashi just says the mashal. He doesn't explain what it's an analogy for, how that plays out in the makkah of dam. Comes to Sfardeya, there Rashi does not just explain how it is in the tactics of a war, but Rashi spells out also how this plays out in the Mak of Tzvardeya. So too the Tzvardeya croak and make noise. So my benayu, what's the difference? Why by Dom does Rashi not spell it out, and by Tzvardeya Rashi does? Dalet, a fourth question on Rashi here is, Rashi maktim v'yesh tam b'dava ba'agoda. Rashi specifies that this comes from a medrash. Move on, she'ena pirish lefi pshuta sham mikra. This reasoning that the medrash says regarding the makis does not go well into the pshat of the pasuk. It's a medrash that could be brought in connection to the pasuk, but it's not the simple pshat of the pasuk. Seemingly, that the Eibishter plagues the Mitzrayim, the same tactics that are used in a war. It's something that could be very simply and well understood, even in the pshat of the pasuk. Why does Rashi emphasize that this is only a medrash and it's not something that flows in the pshat of the pasuk? Why not? This is something that's very logical and reasonable. Hey, another question here is Lama Messiah Rashi Kidi Isa b'Medrash Rabbi Tanchuma, giving you the source that the rest of the story is in the Medrash of Rabbi Tanchuma. It's not Rashi's style to bring the source of what he's writing. Only Rashi only is mitzayin to where he's taking it from if it's relevant for the pshat of the pasuk and he wants you to go look there. So what's the reason why Rashi here tells you that the rest is a Medrash Rabbi Tanchuma? The Gam Lama Cholka L'Shnayim. Why does Rashi write separately? The Kosav B'Tchilas Pirusha Sheyesh Tam B'Dava B'Goda. Rashi gives you the introduction that this Medrash here it's a Medrash. And then in the end he specifies and says Kidi Isa b'Medrash Rabbi Tanchuma, and that this says in the Medrash of Rabbi Tanchuma. Why doesn't Rashi include it together and say V'yesh tam b'dava b'medrash Rabbi Tanchuma? There's a reason in the Medrash of Rabbi Tanchuma. So why does Rashi separate twice and write first Ba'agoda and then again conclude that this is in the Medrash of Rabbi Tanchuma? Vav, the sixth and final question here is Lama maitik Rashi min akosav gam tevas es ha'orif. Why is Rashi bringing in the Dibur HaMaschel the word es as well? The Arif. Halekol pirusha eine ele betevas ha'arif. The pshat of Rashi is only on the word ha'arif. Everything in Rashi is precise, including the Dibur HaMaschel. The fact that Rashi brings the word es is also precise. So why is Rashi quoting the word es in the Dibur HaMaschel? So we have many questions here in both of these Rashis, the Rashi of Mashliach and the Rashi of ha'arif. Rabbi here pointed out that Rashi and the ha'arif brings the snakes and the scorpions. How is that relevant? Why does Rashi specifically point them out? And then mainly the Rebbe is focusing on over here is, why is Rashi suddenly bringing me the reason for the makkis? If in the first three makkis, Rashi did not find it necessary to explain the reason for the makkis. Suddenly here Rashi wakes up to explain the reason for the makkis, and he actually gives you the reason for the previous makkis. And for the Makkah of Arev, he doesn't give an explanation. What's going on? If Arev is what requires an explanation, so let Rashi give an explanation for Arev. If it's the previous Makkahs that requires an explanation, he should have said it there. So how do you answer these Rashis? These are reasons that Rashi brings over here. Habir b'chol zehu. So the explanation for all of this is as follows. B'chol Makkah o Makkah. You look at all the other Makkahs. Whether the ones before Arev or the ones after. What the punishment is, what exactly the terrible thing about the Makkah was, is very clear. In some of the Makkahs you can see it very clearly already in the warning, when Moshe Rabbeinu warns Parei about the Makkah that would be coming. Or certain makkahs there was no warning, but you look at what the Eibishter tells Moshe Rabbeinu when he's going to bring the makkah. It's described what exactly the makkah is and what the punishment is. You see clearly what the makkah is about before it describes that the makkah actually came. When you look over here at the Makkah of Arev, in the warning, all it says is, I'm going to send, I'm going to incite against you an Arev. What does the word Arev mean? A mixture. And that mixture will fill all the houses. The pasuk does not tell us what is this Arev. A mixture of what? What is the punishment that this makkah consists of? So that is what's different and unique about the Makkah of Orev. The way the Torah describes it, it doesn't describe anything about this Makkah other than the fact that it's a mixture. So what is this Makkah all about? So this forces us to say that if the reason why the Torah doesn't tell us more than the word Orev, because it's already indicated before a mixture of what it is, of what this mixture is. When it says Mashliach Bach Orev, that I will incite against you, the Orev Mudgashes Muhusa Shamakezu Puranusa. It already emphasizes what exactly this Makkah is and what the punishment is. Move on. Rak Shezeu Inyan Shal Arbuvya Esa Orev. The only thing that the Torah actually does spell out clearly is the fact that it's a mixture. And that it will come in all your places. Bach, Malabatim Mitzrayim, V'gama Adama, in the houses, in the land, in the earth. L'chein Pirish Rashi, so therefore Rashi says that Mashliach Bach means Megarabach, that he will incite against you. Shemitzah, the Hechrach Amuval El Sefalef Lefarish Mashliach Megara. Since we know that the word Mashliach does not simply mean to send, but it means to incite, so Yuvlan Gam, Mi o Mao Arev, we can understand who and what this Arev is. Mishashayach by Inyan Agirui. It's an existence, it's a mixture of something that you could incite. V'hainu ha-balichayim. Those are wild beasts that you incite them. And when you incite wild beasts, simply understood the destruction that they bring about, they bite and destroy. So it's the words Mashliach B'cha that tells us what the mixture of the Orev is. So it's clear what Orev is and what the punishment is. Kadosh Baruch Hu Yigara Balichayim Harba Berbuvya. The Eibusha will incite many animals to come in a mixture. V'yanashchu v'yashchisu ha-Mitzrayim, and they'll bite and destroy the Mitzrayim. So that's where you see the meaning of what Orev refers to. But however, here the Torah still doesn't clearly say that it's animals. The Torah doesn't say any details about this Makkah other than the description of Orev. When it talks about these animals, it only says the fact that it's a mixture. So v'hinei zeh she'ha-Torah mefaretes, rak zeh shebo ba'orev be'erbuvya. Only the fact that this is going to be a mixture, that the animals came as a mixture, mikola pratim shebemakkah, from any other detail that could be said about this makkah. The fact that we're talking about a mixture of animals is not spelled out clearly. We understand it from the word mashliach, but nevertheless the Torah never spells out clearly that it's animals. The Torah does spell out that it's a mixture. This forces us to say, the Torah is focusing only on the word Orev, that it's a mixture because this is telling us something that I wouldn't know otherwise. And that's as follows. The main novelty and miracle in this nest of the Makkah of Orev, it's the fact that they all came as in a mixture. Any of the other details in this Makkah, there was no other chiddush and there was no other nest other than the fact that it was an Orev. That Eibusha combined many different kinds of wild beasts that usually remain separately, and they all came together to attack the Mitzrayim. That was the nest of this Makkah. So now, if so, this forces us to say, so this was wild beasts that usually attack and not animals. If the Makkah of Orev includes also domesticated animals that came and bit and destroyed, and acted like wild beasts, that would be a tremendous chiddush and a big miracle. The pasuk doesn't tell me any detail about the Makkah. There's no other miracle that it points out other than the fact that it was an Orev, a mixture of wild beasts. So we know now that this is what the nest is about. This is the main thing of what the Makkah consists of, and there's no other miracle that the Torah bothers pointing out. So therefore, Behemoths did not come together in the Makkah of Orev to attack the Mitzrayim to do something against their nature. That would be a separate miracle that would be worthy for the Torah to mention. But if so, the question becomes, if the Eibusha brings a mixture of only animals that by their nature are destructive and are wild animals, so then why does it say mashliach? The Eibishter incites them. Why is it necessary to incite them? It's just necessary to bring them. You bring them, you let them loose, and they'll go and attack all the Mitzrayim. If over here the meaning would be that they were domesticated animals that came, so move on. So it's understood that it's necessary to incite them, so that they will destroy the opposite of their nature. But when it comes to wild animals, wild beasts, this is their nature, to go and destroy, to go and bite. So why is it necessary for the pasuk to say that the Eibush is going to incite them? So on one hand, because the Torah writes Oroiv, and that's the only detail that the Torah mentions about this Makkah, we know that that is the ness of the Makkah, nothing else. So there were only wild beasts. On the other hand, the Torah says Mashliach, that there was something unique about inciting these animals. Why is it necessary to incite wild beasts? To answer this question, Moisif Rashi Loshin Shisoy. So this is what forces Rashi to say that it's not just simply inciting these animals, but there's something more intense. And what Rashi here is saying is, the translation of the word Mashliach means to incite. There are different degrees how much you incite the wild beast. You could incite regularly, and that the wild animals don't need to be incited. They on their own are wild and will go and attack. But and then there's when you intensely incite and aggravate an animal, and that's what shisui means. You aggravate them to the point that they come and they bring destruction more than usual. Since these were wild beasts, and the Torah nevertheless says Mashliach, that Eibush is inciting them, that the point here is that the Eibush didn't just bring the wild animals to attack, but he actually incited them intensely in order for them to attack with greater vigor, they would like aggravated wild animals. However, this is not considered to be something which is opposite their nature, since animals will destroy and attack regardless. Elamai, they incited them and invigorated them or aggravated them a bit more. That's the mashliach. But it's not a separate miracle that is unusual, like we find over here, the word Orev. The word Orev, the Torah specifies specifically, and it calls this Makkah again and again with the word Orev. That is the main miracle over here, the mixture of the animals. So now we can understand the order of the way Rashi presents his pshat. Maybe Rashi rai mepasik v'shen behemes hashalach bam. So Rashi says the pshat that mashliach means to incite, megara. What does he bring as a proof for this? He brings it from Vishen Behemis Ashalach Bam, which means that the Eibishter incites animals, domesticated animals. V'leima pasuk shebeparshas b'chokaisai. Rashi does not bring the pasuk in Parshas b'chokaisai where it talks about wild beasts. Ki mitchila mefarish Rashi nekudas hapirish b'tevis mashliach shehi megara. First, the translation. The correct translation is not to send, but it means to incite. So he brings you a pasuk where it speaks about animals. Animals have to be incited in order to attack. He doesn't bring you the pasuk where it talks about wild animals. They don't even have to be incited. So therefore Rashi brings you a place where you see the Torah using the term mashliach regarding domesticated animals that have to be incited. On their own, they will not destroy or harm. After Rashi explains the meaning of mashliach generally, that it means to incite, then he proves it to you from a pasuk where it talks about animals that have to be incited in order to destroy. That over here, over here, the giroi, the incitement, was more intense. It was shisui, that they were additionally incited and aggravated to come and attack with greater vigor. Just to simply have them incited is not necessary by animals because they are on their own wild beasts. So therefore Rashi separates it. First he says the taich of the word, and he doesn't yet bring lashon shisui. Because when Rashi brings the proof is only to the simple pshat of mashliach, meaning to incite, as opposed to send. Then after Rashi brings the proof to the pshat of the word, Rashi adds that in the context of our pasuk, we have a proof that it has to be shisui, an additional incitement, since over here we're not talking about behemoths, we're talking about wild beasts. So this is the explanation of the Rashi of Mashliach. So the main point that comes out from this Rashi that the Rebbe will now use in the Hemshech of the next Rashi is that the Torah describes this makkah only as orev. That's the only detail that the Torah explicitly mentions, that it's a mixture of animals. This is the main chiddush and miracle of this makkah. So now, Pianal, Yuvam, based on this we'll understand, Shemash Rashi Mamshech Bepirish Atevis Esa Orev, when Rashi continues and explains what the words Esa Orev mean, which is Kol Mine Chayis Rois, Nechashim, Vakravim, Berbuvia, Vaimashchisim Bem, all kinds of wild beasts and snakes and scorpions that came as a mixture and brought destruction. Why is Rashi spelling this out? When Rashi says Esa Orev, what is he coming to explain? Ein Nikroi Lefaret Mi Hoya Be Orev. Rashi is not primarily coming to explain what does the Orev consist of. Kizeh Muvua Dafke Miteves Mashliach Bach. From where do we know that Orev means wild animals? That we learn out from the word mashliach. Mashliach means to incite, and incite refers to the animals. That's what you're going to incite. That's what proves that it's wild animals. Rashi is not saying that it's the word ha'orev itself that proves this. We already know that from before, from mashliach. Ela she'ikre ba'loima. Mainly what Rashi is coming to say is she'kavanas hakasav b'teves ha'orev hishabo be'erbuvya. Rashi is coming to describe that ha'arev, this mixture, the mixture of chayis rois, that's the main chiddush and focus of the nes of this makkah. V'chizeu ha-nes v'chiddush ha-yechidi shoye b'makkah zu, noisef al etzem ha-makkah, in addition to obviously the makkah itself, that it brought destruction, the harm and destruction that the animals brought, but the Torah is emphasizing specifically this miracle that they came and as a mixture. And Rashi is describing this mixture. What does ha'arev mean? The mixture of chayis rois. That's what Rashi is coming to explain, but not that they were actually chayis rois. That I know already from before, from Mashliach. So since Rashi is explaining, Rashi wants to describe to you that this is the chiddush, that they came as a mixture, so Rashi describes what that mixture consists of. Rashi is explaining this mixture, that the whole chiddush of the makkah is the mixture of the many kinds of animals, the many chayis rois that there were. Why Rashi spells out specifically Nechashim v'akravim, the Rebbe will explain that soon. But the point is that Rashi is just describing the mixture, so you should understand that this is the main chiddush of this makkah, that it's not just animals that came to attack them, but a mixture of chayis rois that came to attack them. That's the main focus of this makkah. Now we understand why Rashi brings from the pasuk the word es ha'orev, the orev. This is another reason that brings us to the conclusion that the main chiddush of this makkah is the fact that these animals came as a mixture. If the mixture is not the main chiddush, it's just a detail of the whole makkah, that they happen to have come in a mixture, but it's not the main point. So then how does the pasuk say, Hineni mashliach bach es ha'orev, I'm going to send to you the orev. This is what Hashem is inciting. The mixture. The pasuk could say, that described that it came, the animals arrived in a mixed form, that they all came mixed together. Okay, but that's not what it says. It says, es ha'orev, the orev. That's what Hashem is bringing. Since the pasuk says, Hineni mashliach b'cha, es ha'aroiv, the aroiv, mochrach, shezeu, achidish, v'nesa meyuchad shebemakkah. So it's this word es that also forces us to say that this is the main chiddush of the makkah. V'zeu, ha'chachasa shel Rashi, noisef alanal, sha'kasav balahadge, she'ikra nesa ma'shabal berbuvya. In addition to what we explained before, the very fact that the Torah just keeps on calling it aroiv, and it doesn't mention any other detail. It doesn't even say who what it is, what the mixture is. But now we could also see the additional emphasis of the Torah es. This is what brings us to the conclusion that the fact that it was a mixture of animals is the main point of this makkah. The Rebbe continues, we can now give an additional explanation why Rashi doesn't spell out bears, lions, and leopards, in addition to what the Rebbe said before, that it's not necessary for Rashi to spell out anything, because Chayis Rois includes everything. But there's an additional reason why Rashi doesn't want to mention specifically these animals. Ein klal echacha b'pshuta shel mikra, eiz achayis rois nimtzu b'zman ahi b'gvul Mitzrayim v'svivaseh. We have no idea what kind of animals were found around Mitzrayim, in Mitzrayim, or around Mitzrayim in that time period. Not necessarily were bears, lions, or leopards in that area of the world at all. If Rashi would specifically spell out that there were bears, lions, and leopards, it would seem then that the chiddush here would be that Hashem imported the animals from all four corners of the world. He brought them from other places far away to come and attack the Mitzrayim. Then that would be a huge additional miracle, that the Eibush is bringing animals that they've never seen before in their life, that came from faraway places to attack them. And that's not the case. The Torah says Orayv. It was a mixture of animals. It's the mixture which is the ness of this makkah, but no other chiddush, no other ness. So therefore Rashi says that these are chayis rois, wild beasts. So you understand that this refers to the wild beasts that were in that area of the world around Mitzrayim, without spelling out which animals they were. Because then you would think that maybe Rashi is coming to say that it's specifically a chiddush of these animals that were imported from a faraway place. And that's not the chiddush of this makkah. The chiddush of this makkah is Orev, the mixture that came to attack them. Now based on the premise of what we're explaining here, that the only chiddush of the ness of Orev is the fact that it was a mixture, but there was no additional ness that occurred that the Torah bothers to mention. So we can understand also a hechrech the Rashi lefarish shehoyisham gam the choshen v'akravim. What forces Rashi to say chayis rois? He all includes them in the general term of chayis rois, but then Rashi spells out in the choshen and akravim the snakes and the scorpions. And here the Rebbe shows us, if you look very closely into the way the pasuk is written, so then you'll see what's the reason Rashi says this. The pasuk zeh Messiah. So in this pasuk it concludes and says, "V'gam ha'adama asher heim aleha," and also the land or the earth that they are on it. So what is the simple pshat of this pasuk? So the full quote of the pasuk, which you have in the beginning of the sikha, is "Umalu bate Mitzrayim esa arev." The houses of the Mitzrayim will be filled with this arev. V'gam ha'adama asher heim aleha, and also the earth which they are on it. So the question is, when it says they are on it, what is they referring to? Haim. Who is the Haim referring to? So the Rebbe analyzes the pasuk here and says, if the pasuk would be written differently, Umalei ha'orev es bate Mitzrayim, the orev will fill the houses of the Mitzrayim, v'gam ha'adam asher heim aleha, and it will also fill the earth, the land which they are on it. Meaning ha'orev for ikke b'kosov. We're talking primarily about the Orev filling all of Mitzrayim. That's not what it says in the pasuk, though, right? In the pasuk it says that Umalu bate Mitzrayim es ha'orev. The pasuk is talking about the houses. It's focusing on the place, on the houses, that the houses will be filled, and then the Gama Adama Sheim Alau. That's the way the pasuk is written. But the Rebbe here is saying, what's it the pasuk would be focusing and write it differently. V'gam or Umalei ha'orev es bate Mitzrayim, focusing on the Orev, explaining where the Orev is going to go, that the Orev is going to go everywhere. If the main focus is describing the Orev, so then, Hoya Makim Loimar, we would say, Kiheim Musav ala Iker. When it says, V'gam ha'adama sheheim olea, so it's referring to the main focus of what the pasuk is saying here, which is ha'arev. It's talking about where the arev is going to be. The arev is going to fill the houses, and also v'gam ha'adama sheheim olea, and they're also going to fill the land which they are on it. That would be the pshat if the pasuk would be written in this way. But in fact, what does the pasuk say? Umalu bate Mitzrayim esarev geimer, that the houses will be filled with the arev. So it's talking about the result of what's going to happen to the houses. But the Mitzrayim, the pasuk is focusing about the effect, how the houses will be affected by the Arev. So then if so, how do you read the whole flow of the continuation of the pasuk? So it's as if it would be written as follows. Umalu bate Mitzrayim es ha'arev. The Arev will fill the houses. V'gama dama asher habatim maya Mitzrayim aleh, and also the ground, which the houses, when it says Haim refers to the houses, that the houses are on this ground, Malaya Arev will also be filled with the Arev. In other words, what the pasuk is doing is it's equating, it's comparing the same effect. The way the Orev will fill the houses, in the same way the Orev will fill the ground. It's comparing the two. If the Torah would simply be saying, Umali ha'orev es batim Mitzrayim, so the pasuk is talking about the Orev. It's not trying to compare the way the effect of Orev will be in the houses and the effect that it's going to have in the Adama. It's talking about the location of where the Orev is going to be. The Orev is going to come into the houses and the Orev is going to come to the Adama. But we're not necessarily comparing the way they're going to be, the effect of the Orev being in the houses, that they're going to be the same way also in the ground. However, now that the pasuk writes, Umalo Batei Mitzrayim es ha'orev, we're focusing on the houses, on the way the houses will be affected by the orev. And immediately after that it says, V'gam adama sheheim oleh, heim referring to the houses. So we're comparing the effect of the orev on the ground, the way it affects the houses. So what does that mean? We're equating the two. The way the orev fills the houses, that's the way the orev fills the ground. The question is that really true? How does the Orev fill the houses? They enter into the homes, they fill the houses. Is the Orev over here going to enter into the ground itself, go underground? Is that what the pasuk means to say? That's what it would seem. If the pasuk is focusing on the houses and comparing the way it affects the houses and the ground, the pasuk here is telling you a tremendous chiddush, that the Orev will be on the ground. That's the diuk here in the pasuk. Another diuk, that the word heim does not refer to the orev, but it refers to the houses, and it's comparing the ground which the houses are standing on to the houses themselves, the way the orev affects the houses. V'oid v'ikar, another main point there is, b'chol parsha zu, ha'orev u'loshin yachid. The word orev is always used in a singular term. Vayavay v'sar v'yasar v'imkein havela l'meima shehu aleho. If the Torah is simply speaking about the orev itself, where the orev will go to, so then it should have said that the orev will be in the houses and it will also go to the land which it's on it, referring to who, singular term, to the orev. But instead it says heim. Heim is plural, referring to the Mitzrayim, or to their houses. And it's saying that the way, this equating, this way, the same way the Orev fills the houses, the same way it'll also fill the grounds which the houses are placed upon. If so, we must say, in the simple pshat of the way you read this pasuk, when it says heim aleh, it's referring to the houses, or the Mitzrayim in their houses. That not only will the Orev fill the houses, what it's saying is that it'll fill, the same way it fills the houses, it'll also fill the ground which they stand on. Meaning to say that the Orev will be under the ground. That's, in other words, they were attacked from all sides. They were all over in their houses, and when they walked in the street, from under the ground, the Orev came out, it filled the ground. That's what the pasuk here is saying. If that's the pshat, so then this is a unique and unbelievable miracle. That all these wild beasts will be filling the ground. Opposite their nature. That there was no additional miracle here besides the fact that it's described as Orev, as a mixture. No other miracle besides this. This is the main focus and objective of the Makkah, that it should be in a mixture of animals. But this additional miracle that they were underground, the pasuk doesn't make mention of such a thing. So, if this is an additional miracle, so then why is the pasuk only focusing and referring to it as Orev, as a mixture of animals? So therefore Rashi says that which animals, which wild beasts were on the ground, the snakes and scorpions. That's natural. That's where they live. They live in pits and on the ground. We know this from what Rashi says before. When Yosef was thrown in the pit, and the pasuk says there was no water, it is filled with water. So it is filled with snakes and scorpions, that is. That's the place where they are. So this is not something that's against their nature. So this is not a unique chiddush regarding the makkah of Orev, and therefore the Torah does not make mention of this uniquely as it does regarding the main point of this makkah, which is Orev, the fact that it's a mixture of animals. That's the main point of this makkah, and that's the main objective of this makkah. But Vafal Pikein, now that Rebbe points out, although Rashi has a reason why he says Nechoshen V'Akrabim, which is based on the continuation of the pasuk, which we were medayik here, V'gam Adom Hashem Aleh, Ein Rashi maitek atevis v'gam adama shehem oleh. Rashi does not quote that part of the pasuk. V'gam enim meramzam v'v'gaimer. Rashi doesn't even hint to it with a v'gaimer. Ki ka'amor, as mentioned, kan ein ikke inyan shel Rashi lefaret mini achai sheva kosh baruch b'makas arif. The main objective of Rashi here is not to let you know what this mixture consists of. Rashi is describing this only to emphasize that the mixture is the main point of the makkah. Once he's on the topic, so he tells you that there was nechashim and akravim as well, which is understood from the continuation of the pasuk where it says "V'gam adama shehem aleh," that they were on the ground, which is only by the nechashim and akravim. Okay, so now we see what the main makkah is. The makkah mainly is the orayv. There was no domesticated animals, and there was no additional major miracle that occurred here. The Eibishter brought these wild animals in a mixture, and of course the main makkah is about the fact that they attacked them, but the main point that the Torah finds necessary to mention is the fact that they came as a mixture. That's the main point of the makkah. So now, omnam inyan doirish beer, but this itself needs a tremendous explanation. Why is this the whole focus and objective of the makkah? That they came as a mixture. So much so that the Torah is telling you, it keeps on talking about this makkah as orev, the mixture of animals. Any other nest did not happen. Any other detail about the nest of this makkah, even the fact that they destroyed and they bit them and so on, the Torah doesn't mention. It's the orev, the mixture. Why is that the main focus of the makkah? That's the pella over here. So therefore Rashi immediately continues and explains, there's a reason explained in the Medrash for the makkahs. This explains us the chiddush why the Torah is focusing specifically on the mixture of the animals. And Rashi says, the Eibishter came with the tactics of kings and wars. That one of the main things done in a war is to blow with shofris, to raise an alarm, to make noise, to scare them, to frighten them, and to confuse them. As we see by Tzfardei, that they croaked and made noise. This is the main point Rashi focuses on. So Nimtzai, from this medrash we understand, one of the main tactics in a war is to do things, to scare and to confuse your enemy. That was the main thing that the Makkah of Orev came to accomplish. The reason the animals come in a mixture. It's to scare them and to confuse them. If you see a specific herd of animals of one type, so then the fright and the confusion is not as big. So when you see all these different kinds of mixture of animals that are coming and attacking you, so here the fear and the confusion, which is the main point of what this makkah is about, is much greater. So the destruction is actually not the main point of the makkah. The main point of the makkah is the fear and the confusion that this makkah brought on them. Since Rashi is focusing on this detail, which you see in the pasuk, the mixture of these animals, so therefore Rashi brings the reason for this makkah right here, and it's a continuation of what he explains here. And he only brings the reason of the two first makkahs. He's mainly quoting and focusing on the reason that it says by Tzfadeya, v'lo yoser, and not more. Primarily, Rashi wants to bring you the reason that it says by Tzfadeya about the noise and the confusion and the fear, which is the point of the makkah. That explains why the Torah focuses primarily on the mixture when it comes to the makkah of Orev. So this explains beautifully why in the previous makkahs Rashi doesn't have to bring anything. Over here, when Rashi is bringing this reason, he's bringing this reason of Tzfardeya as an explanation for the makkah of Orev. Why the Torah is focusing primarily on the noise and the confusion or the fear that they had from the mixture of the chayas. So we can understand why Rashi spells out only the makkah of Tzfardeya. We understand from this that the main point of the makkah is to bring fear upon the Mitzrayim. That was the main thing, the confusion and the fear. And that was achieved in the Makkah of Orev, when the animal didn't simply come and attack them, but all kinds of animals at once came as a mixture to attack them. That brings a tremendous fear and confusion. In the beginning, Rashi says that this is a reason that says in the Medrash. Even though this pshat fits into the pasuk as well, it's logical. In the simple pshat of the pasuk, there are other reasons that we know for this makkah. B'makas dam tzvardeya lahalkas yirasam. Dam and tzvardeya, it's to hit their gods. Or b'makas kinim laharis lachatumim she'etz balakimi kanal. The third makkah kinim, to show that it's a finger of Hashem, that they can't create this kinim. So the objective of those makkahs are clear in the pasuk itself. This additional reason is in Medrash. But looking at what the Medrash says regarding the previous makkahs, specifically regarding Tzvardeya, we'll understand why here the Torah focuses and refers to this makkah as an Orev, because it's the main inyan of this makkah, the fact that it came to scare and confuse the Mitzrayim by the mixture of these animals that came to attack them. It's not that this Maggada, this pshat of Medrash, is a contradiction to the simple pshat of the pasuk. It's just not seen from the simple pshat of the pasuk, but this could be an additional objective of the makkah. However, the reasons that you see there in the pasuk by Dam, Tzvardeya, and Kinim, that's clear in the pasuk itself, each in their place. So this is the explanation of why we're focusing on the erbuvia. There was sort of a psychological warfare against the Mitzrayim, which is actually even more powerful than the actual physical destruction that was brought upon them. However, this is not yet smoothly understood. Although this is not really a very strong question, Rashi only hints the answer to this question, as we'll point out, but there's still a question here. For who? As follows: Hey Nemes, true, the fact that the animals come as a mixture is a big point. It confuses them and it scares them. Why is only this mentioned in the pasuk? So much so, the fact that the pasuk doesn't even talk about the actual destruction. So you see that the fact that it scared them and it confused them is so much greater in this makkah than the actual physical destruction. So the Torah doesn't even mention that. That's not the main point. Why is that? Isn't the destruction itself a major component of this makkah? So therefore Rashi hints and says, as an answer to this question, you have to see what it says further there in the Medrash of Rab Tanchuma. Sham, behemshech linyan anal, over there, as a continuation to this point, Misuper, asher kirkuran hoyekoshala mashchasasam. The noise that the Tzvardeya made was more difficult for the Mitzrayim to handle than the actual destruction that they brought. And as I mentioned before, this is the point over here. The psychological warfare that Hashem brought upon the tactic in a war, when you have the psychologically, you're fighting your enemy in such a way that you bring this noise and confusion, is actually more difficult to handle than the actual physical destruction. And that's what the Medrash there is explaining regarding the Makkah of Tzvardeya. They just couldn't handle it. The same is also true regarding Orev. That this point of the Makkah, the noise and the confusion and the fear, that the mixture of animals that came to attack them is much greater than the actual physical destruction that it brought about. This is the v'chulu in Rashi. The v'chulu in Rashi is not that if you want to see the story and the reason for all the other makkahs, look, you want to see the reason for all the other makkahs, look over there in the Medrash. No, it's not negaya here to see the reason of all the makkahs. This point, that the noise is more harmful to the Mitzrayim than the actual physical destruction, explains the Makkah of Orev. It explains why the Torah focuses on the term Orev and not on the physical destruction, because that's much more harmful and had a much more long-term effect on the Mitzrayim, and they couldn't handle that much more than the physical destruction. So this is the conclusion of the explanation of the point of the Makkah of Orev and why the Torah refers to it only as Orev and not as anything else. That was the main point of the Makkah. So now the Rebbe is going to come from this and go back to the first Makkis, and in contrast to the Makkah of Orev, and show us a tremendous chiddush that you see coming out of here according to Rashi. Al Pia Amalel, Sheikara Tam the Gimel Makkis Harishanis, the Pshuta Shemikra, Eine Tama Medrash. Based on what we said, according to Rashi, the main reason for the first three Makkis is actually not the reason that it says in the Medrash. Vaharaya, Rashi doesn't quote it earlier. Rashi only quotes it here by Orev, and he's bringing it specifically as an explanation for Orev. Kiyim, the reason for the first three Makkis was Lahalkis Yirasan, and Lahadas Lachatumim Shadz Balakimi, to hit their gods and to show their Chatumim that it's a finger of God. So Yuvan Oidinya. We can understand another point that it says specifically by Orev and not by the first three Makkis. The Makkis Orev Koso Vachakach, the Torah says by Orev. Ve'efleisi b'yema hu es eretz Goshen Hashem me'oim medalel u'bliya Yoshem Orev v'gayver. I will separate the city of Goshen from all the other places, that there will be no Orev in the city of Goshen. Sheitzu b'nei Yisrael lehoisam Makkis Orev. The Yidden did not experience the Makkah of Orev. The question here is, Lama lekasu b'gimel Makkis Harishonis shalei hayu eitzel b'nei Yisrael. Why does the Torah not tell us by the first of the, or any of the three Makkis, that the Yidden did not experience those Makkis? If it's self-understood that the Makkis are being brought on the Mitzrayim only, so why does the Torah spell it out specifically by the Makkah of Orev? So there are various opinions. Even Ezra Kaisef, the Even Ezra says, "Ulefi daiti ki makas hadam v'atzfardim v'akinim hoisa kelelis hamitzriyim ve'oivrim chulu." The first three Makkis actually was brought upon the Mitzrayim and the Yidden. Ve'elu hashalosh ma'ati ziku. The harm of these three Makkis was minimal comparing to Orev. Rak Makkis Orev shaisa kasha. Orev, which was a much more difficult destruction, Hashem hifrish ben HaMitzrim and ben Yisrael. Here they were separated between the Yidden and the Mitzrim. That's what it says in the Even Ezra. Omnam haradvaz b'tshuvasa kaisef. The Radvaz writes in a tshuva, U'mashe kosav Rabbi Avram ben Ezra, ki Makkis adam v'atzfardim v'akinim hoisel Mitzrim Yisrael, that the first three Makkis were both, but for the Yidden and for the Mitzrim alike, Oster lahamin davar zeh. It's forbidden to believe such a thing. Kol shekain shaksuvim meirim lahepech. Definitely the psukim show otherwise. V'layachlu mitzrim lishtes min hayar v'yachru mitzrim svivus hayar. The pasuk clearly says mitzrim, that the mitzrim couldn't find water and they had to dig around and they couldn't find any water. Mashma al Yisrael lo yitzrichim lezeh. It seems clear that the Yidden didn't have this problem. Ki hayishaysim imeme hayar. They would drink the water. Ubetzfardim ksiv, also by the tzfardim it spells out specifically the Mitzrayim. Uvecha uveamcha v'goyme v'soro atzfardim mimcha umibatecha umeavadecha umeyamcha. When he speaks to Para, he speaks to him, about his nation, about his servants. Mashma shlehoyu b'Yisrael. Again, it's pretty clear that it wasn't by the Yidden. V'chein akinim, similar by kinim, even though by kinim it doesn't specifically point out the Mitzrayim. Over there it just says Adam, that it was brought on the people in Mitzrayim. But v'yilmoid sasam and amafurish. You could learn out in the Makkah of Kinim, where the Torah does not say clearly, from what it does specify earlier, that it was including it was only in the Mitzrayim and not including the Yidden. The law yadaiti. Besides this, the Radvaz says, I don't understand. Ima Makkah isa gamli Yisrael. If the first three Makkahs also affected the Yidden, ma raya yeshbol aparash yishlach es Yisrael. So what? Why would Rashi think that he would have to send out the Yidden from Mitzrayim? He'll tell Moshe, look, the Yidden are affected by this Makkah as well. It's not a Makkah being brought on me. On the contrary, he'll blame the Yidden for this Makkah. It's the Jews that brought this Makkah on themselves and on us. So how could he say that the Makkah was brought on the Mitzrayim and the Yidden alike? This is the Radvaz. The Rambam, the Pirush HaMishnah is Kaisiv. The Rambam says, this is a Rambam in Perkei Yavis, Shemakis damut tzvadeya loihoyu b'Yisrael klal. The first two Makkahs, the Yidden were not affected by it all. Like you see in the Lashon of the Pasuk, that what we just quoted here, that the Radvaz quotes, it specifically says that it was brought on the Mitzrayim. Mashenke Makkahs Kinim, hoisa gambehem. The Makkah of Kinim was brought upon Yidden as well, because it does not say only the Mitzrayim. It says over there, Odom, it was brought on people. However, they had lice, but it did not affect them. They did not suffer from these lice. That's the Rambam's opinion. Now, what's Rashi's opinion? Rashi doesn't even hint any answer to the question. Why in the first three Makkahs the Torah does not write ve'efleisi? So it's clear that Rashi thinks that that's not a question. If the Torah only writes ve'eflesi by Orayv, so that means by the first three makis, that is, the Mitzrayim and the Yidden alike experience those makis. Amazing, unbelievable chiddush, the Rebbe says. That's a simple pshat of the pasuk. By kinam, the Torah just says Adam. It affected people and animals. Adam stam. This is that the Rambam adds, that the Yidden had the Makkah of Kinim, however, they didn't suffer. That, the Rebbe says, there's no rai for this. Kiminolan came mikra. There's no indication for this in the pshat of the pasuk. So according to the simple pshat of the pasuk, the first three Makkahs affected the Mitzrayim and the Yidden alike. Now, when again, Kushi said advaz, lama madgish hakos of Mitzrayim, b'makas dam et tzvardeya. So then why does the Torah clearly say by both dam and tzvardeya, the Mitzrayim are the ones that suffered? So move on b'pashtus. They were the main focus of the Makkah. The main focus of the Makkah was because of the Mitzrayim. So therefore it speaks about the Mitzrayim. But the actual Makkah did affect the Yidden and the Mitzrayim alike. But then the final question that the Radvaz asks is a very strong question. If the Yidden were affected by the first three Makkahs, so then why would Pari get moved by these Makkahs? Why would he think that he has to send Yidden out of Mitzrayim if Yidden are being affected by these Makkahs as well? If in fact, like the Even Ezra says, and the Rebbe says, Rashi holds, that the first three Makkahs did affect the Yidden, why? Why did the first three Makkahs have to affect the Yidden as well? Ulam, al pi anal, move on. But based on what we explained before, what the objective of the first three Makkahs is, we can understand this. B'kiven she'eshtei Makkahs harishonos pirish Rashi. As far as the first two Makkahs, Rashi explains. Shehevia kadosh baruch hu b'shvil halkas yirosam. They were brought in order to hit their gods. Harei move on, shekashe yira parei, she'avodah zarah shaloi loike. So it's understood what will be achieved with these makkahs. When he'll see that his Avodah Zarah is being hit, Yikuyim by B'zayis Teda Kemi Hashem. This will bring him to know that the Eibishter is the God. Vim Gam B'nei Yisrael Yizbulu Miseh. If even Yidden are suffering in these makkahs, like Tuktan Al Yedei Zeh HaHalka B'Avodah Zarah Shaloi, that doesn't minimize the fact that his Avodah Zarah is being hit, and that recognition of Parai will be achieved. Since the point of here is to hit the Avodah Zarah of the Mitzrayim, it has to hit the Avodah Zarah of the Mitzrayim in every location in Mitzrayim, including where the Yidden are, without exception. Since the point is to hit the gods, you have to hit the Avodah Zarah in every place. If not, Paroi will think to himself, this part of his Avodah Zarah, and the place where it was not affected in Goshen, look, there's a part of my Avodah Zarah that still survived this makkah. So in order to hit the God fully, that he should receive, it had to hit the Avodah Zarah of Mitzrayim without any exception. So therefore, Dam and Tzvardeya affected all of the Ye'irim, all of the water, wherever it was in Mitzrayim. Similar could be said regarding the Makkah of Kinim. That they should realize this is a finger of Hashem. This is something that Hashem brought. So this is a Makkah that has to come and affect the entire Mitzrayim without any limitations. Why? Because otherwise, the main point of here is the Chartumim of Mitzrayim kept on saying that these Makkahs are brought about by Moshe and Aaron that are themselves Chartumim. They could create with their kishuv all of these Dam and Svardeya, but it's not the hand of God, or it's not the finger of God. The main point of here is it's trying to prove to them that the Makkah of Kinim was not created by Chartumim like Mugbalim, Moshe and Aaron, that they said were Chartumim. They are the Chatumim. Like they were arguing and said regarding the first two Makkahs. Now, the Chatumim of Mitzrayim could not even create one lice. However, Hine Gam Moshe v'Aaron lo yochlu la'leisan al shetach v'anoshim b'siyamim. They would argue and say, look, Moshe and Aaron may be more powerful than us. They're greater Chatumim than us. But even they are limited. They can't bring it in every single place in Mitzrayim. They can't bring it in every section and in every area. They're greater than us, but they're still limited. So l'chein haisam b'chrachas liyes b'chol mokim gam b'nei Yisrael, in order that there shouldn't be any room to say that this is a makkah that's limited, that is brought by limited human beings. It had to be a makkah that covered the entire Mitzrayim without any exception, so it should be clear that the makkah is being brought by the Eibishter, which is unlimited, and nothing can stop him, and he can affect the entire Mitzrayim without exception. That was the objective of this makkah of Kinim. So we see here that the objective of the first 3 makkahs is achieved only if this makkah includes both the Yidden and the Mitzrayim. They both suffered. When it comes to the makkah of Orev, there's no reason to include Yidden as well. The main point, as we learned before Barichas, was to frighten and to scare and to confuse the Mitzrayim. So here, therefore the Torah says that the Eibush is separated between the Mitzrayim and the Yidden, and only the Mitzrayim that is experienced this makkah. Now on a deeper level, we can say this, the separation between Yidden and the Mitzrayim, is specifically only by the makkah of Orev. When it comes to the first 3 makkahs, it's not necessary to separate between the Yidden and the Mitzrayim. In other words, here the Rebbe is saying, even if we were to say, like the other opinions, that in fact Yidden were separated from the Mitzrayim by the first 3 makkahs, but it's not necessary for the Torah to say this. Even if the Yidden did experience, actually the Rebbe is saying, even if the Yidden did experience the makkahs, no one would ever have a thought to say, God forbid, that there's room to say that Yidden could assimilate and mix with the Mitzrayim. The fact that Yidden are experiencing these makkahs together with the Mitzrayim would not in any way make the Yidden think that the boundary between them and the Mitzrayim has been breached and they could assimilate. They wouldn't think such a thing. The Yidden understood that they're separate. Which is not the case though when it comes to the makkah of Orev. What was the makkah of Orev itself? The whole content of the makkah of Orev itself is breaking down boundaries. The Eibishter mixes various different wild beasts, and he brings them all together. So the whole makkah was like this breach and this opening of nature, of all the barriers of nature coming down, and all these wild beasts coming together as one. This itself may have been taken as some kind of a message that the Eibishter has removed all boundaries that separate between Yidden and Goyim, just as we see over here that these animals came and are attacking us and the Mitzrayim equally, and we see in the makkah itself that all these different animals that are usually separated are now here together attacking. As the boundary between one animal and another, and between the snakes and the scorpions, has all been removed. So the thought could come and take a message from this, that the barrier between Yidden and all nations has also been removed. So specifically by this makkah, Chofetz HaKadosh Baruch Hu Laharis, the Eibishter wants to show Shamechitza Kayem as Gam B'Shozo. Note that the barrier, the separation between Yidden and Goyim remains even now. By the makkah of Orev, when there's such a confusion, such a mixture in the nature and the world itself, so that the Yidden shouldn't take a message of this, that the separation between them and all nations has been taken down, so the Eibush has to put up a barrier and say, no, there's a separation between my people and Lahavdol, the Mitzrayim. The lesson we take from this for now is simply understood. In a time period when there's such a confusion and mixture in the world, barriers and certain norms in society are being broken down in a way that it was never before. The barrier, the separation between Yidden and Lahavdol Goyim has to remain and be even stronger. Even then when Yidden were in Mitzrayim, this is still before Matan Torah, before the Yidden became the chosen nation. And there was a makkah of Orev, and there's a place for a concern that Yidden could think that they don't have a barrier separating them and the Mitzrayim. Hasa Kadosh Baruch Hu Nes Miyucha. There's a unique miracle that the Eibusher performs. Lasum Pedos Ben Ami Ben Amecha, to separate between the Yidden and the Mitzrayim. Alachas Kama V'Kama. So how much more so now after Matan Torah, that Zmanenu Zeh, and in our time with the confusion that's going on in the world and in society in general, how important it is for Yidden to remain separate. This separation is regarding every single Yid without exception. Even those that eventually did not leave, they did not want to leave Mitzrayim, so they were also separated from the Makkah of Ariv. So this is an additional point here. This is a separation between a Yid and Lahavdul, a Goy, regardless of who this Yid is. Even if it's a Yid that doesn't identify so, it's just like a nickname, but he doesn't have any behavior as a Yid. But nevertheless, if he's a Yid, he has to be separated, and there's a barrier between a Yid and Lahavdul, a Goy. When Yidden will strengthen this barrier, then there'll be no separation between Yidden and the Eibishter. And the Achas mi Yisrael, every single Yid, Yoshuv b'tshuva shleima, will do tshuva, and immediately Yidden will be redeemed, by the final and full redemption, al yidei Mashiach Tzidkenu, through Mashiach Tzidkenu.